have no choice.
It's also history that intersected squarely with a famous figure from these parts.
A short time ago, an American airplane dropped one bomb on Hiroshima and destroyed its usefulness to the enemy.
The Harry S. Truman Presidential Library and Museum in Independence has lots to tell us about it.
We go straight to the atomic bomb material. Well, there's one item that's above all others, and that is the safety plug that was part of the Nagasaki bomb. The engineer, Philip Barnes, who donated the plug to the library, would take out the green plug, put in the activating plug, which was red, and then the bomb would be dropped. So the safety plug's purpose was so the bomb would not explode on the plane. Philip Barnes is the engineer that takes that out. He's got his engineer's fingerprints on this plug. It's a stunning piece. Sometimes small objects have a big story.
Here's the amazing thing. Truman had held office less than 4 months when he made the decision to authorize using the bomb to save the lives of American soldiers. As vice president, he hadn't even been told about the Manhattan Project. Less than 2 weeks into his presidency, that changed abruptly.
We've got the letter here on display that talks about where he's introduced to that topic by the Secretary of War, Henry Stimson. So he said, we need to sit down. We've got this highly secret matter. It could change bearing on everything. So it's a really significant document.
The museum also displays other significant correspondence, including an account from General Leslie Groves on the first test at Los Alamos. Truman was in Germany at the time.
He's meeting with Stalin and Churchill at the Potsdam Conference, and he receives this report. And the last page of that report is a handwritten sketch from a B-29 of the first atomic bomb cloud. So we got a really good sense from Groves of the immensity of the bomb. A couple of eyewitnesses contributed to that report as well, describing the shape, the color, the explosion, how far it went, how it exceeded all expectations.
That sounds like a pretty rare piece.
It is, and it's here.
The devastation unleashed on Japan in August 1945 is displayed here in unflinching detail, just a few feet away from a gesture of peace. These images of origami cranes were inspired by the story of Sadako Sagami, a Japanese girl who folded more than 1,000 of them after surviving the blast at Hiroshima.
This is one of the last cranes that she folded. She ultimately died of radiation sickness, but her brother is still alive, and he donated it to the library in 2015. We're not there to tell people what to think, how to interpret the material. Our exhibits are the same way. So our mantra is, you do the research, you come look, you examine, and you decide. And that's probably the best way for a presidential library to operate. We have a short introductory video. And at the end of that video, it says, what in Truman's past prepared him for the presidency? And that sets up our whole exhibit display. That's kind of a theme for our exhibit. But when it comes to that day, when FDR dies on April 12th, and he becomes president, when I give a tour, I say, actually, I don't think he's prepared, because there's so much on his plate. Wars going on in Germany, wars going on in Japan. People are talking about creating the United Nations. The world is in ruin, but he does it anyway. He makes the decisions, he doesn't look back on those, and he forges ahead. And so when we talk about whether he's prepared for the presidency, no, but who would have been? Who would have been prepared for these 4 months? It's impossible.
They have been repaid manyfold, and the end is not yet. With this bomb, we have now added a new and revolutionary increase in destruction to supplement the growing power of our armed forces. In their present form, these bombs are now in production, and even more powerful forms are in development. It is an atomic bomb. It is a harnessing of the basic power of the universe. The force from which the sun draws his power has been loosed against those who brought war to the Far East. We are now prepared to destroy more rapidly and completely every productive enterprise the Japanese have in any city. We shall destroy their docks, their factories, and their communications. Let there be no mistake. We shall completely destroy Japan's power to make war. It was to spare the Japanese people from utter destruction that the ultimatum of July the 26th was issued at Potsdam. Their leaders promptly rejected that ultimatum. If they do not now accept our terms, they may expect a rain of ruin from the air, the like of which has never been seen on this earth. Behind this air attack will follow sea and land forces in such numbers and power as they have not yet seen, and with the fighting skill of which they are already well aware. We have spent more than $2 billion on the greatest scientific gamble in history, and we have won. But the greatest marvel is not the size of the enterprise, its secrecy, or its cost, but the achievement of scientific brains in making it work. And hardly less marvelous has been the capacity of industry to design and of labor to operate the machines and methods to do things never done before. Both science and industry work together under the direction of the United States Army, which achieved a unique success in an amazingly short time. It is doubtful if such another combination could be got together in the world. What has been done is the greatest achievement of organized science in history.
Laboratory, and location where the atomic weapons were tested and developed. The reason for President Roosevelt's decision to start up the Manhattan Project could be traced back to 2 or 3 key moments. The Einstein-Szilard letter being sent to the president in 1939, along with Britain's Maud Committee findings and Japan's attack on Pearl Harbor, both in 1941. In 1939, physicist Leo Szilard was one of many scientists concerned about the recent discovery of fission by German scientists Otto Hahn and Fritz Strassmann. These scientists feared that Nazi Germany would use uranium being mined by the Belgians to develop a fission bomb. Szilard met with fellow physicists Albert Einstein and Eugene Wigner and Edward Teller to draft a letter warning President Roosevelt about the possible threat posed by the Germans. Szilard wrote the letter and Einstein edited, signed, and forwarded it to the president. Though the Einstein-Szilard letter urged President Roosevelt to start a U.S. nuclear testing program, it was Britain's Maud Committee that really convinced him to put the Manhattan Project into high gear in about October or November of 1941. The committee finally proved an atomic bomb was a realistic invention in the sense that a reasonable amount of enriched uranium-235 could be made from uranium-238 to make a nuclear chain reaction. Scientists originally feared that it would take tons more uranium to accomplish this goal. A little over 2 years after Einstein's Szilard letter was sent, and mere months after President Roosevelt learned of the Maud Committee findings, Japanese aircraft appeared over the U.S. naval base at Pearl Harbor on Oahu Island, Hawaii, in the early morning of December 7, 1941. During the overwhelming assault that followed, over 3,000 Americans were wounded or killed, including civilians and military personnel, and over 180 aircraft were destroyed. However, the attack didn't have as big of an impact as the Japanese had expected. The U.S. Navy's Pacific Fleet, while certainly beat down, were not out of the fight. Even though several battleships were damaged or lost, the indispensable aircraft carriers were all away from Pearl Harbor at the time of the attack, and the critical important oil storage facilities on the island were left unharmed. President Roosevelt called December 7, 1941, the date which will live in infamy. The next day, Congress issued a declaration of war against Japan and joined World War II on the side of the Allied powers. In a wave of support, the American public left behind their earlier call for neutrality and the United States Armed Forces mobilized to avenge the 7th. Based on the information we just discussed, why do you think President Roosevelt waited almost 3 years after receiving the Einstein's Lard letter to authorize the creation of the Manhattan Project? What finally convinced him to start the program? 1941 was a long time ago, so let's compare what happened on Pearl Harbor to something a bit more recent, the September 11th, 2001 terrorist attacks. On your own, research these two events and write down how they were similar and how they differed. Be sure to pay close attention to how American public responded, what conflicts followed, and the impact the events had on minority groups within the United States.
Was issued at Potsdam. Their leaders promptly rejected that ultimatum. If they do not now accept our terms, they may expect a rain of ruin from the air, the like of which has never been seen on this earth. Behind this air attack will follow sea and land forces in such numbers and power as they have not yet seen, and with the fighting skill of which they are already well aware.